We got a ton of new info on Ghost of Yotei that got me way more excited, from new details on the open world, combat and how much freedom you have in the main story. But we also learned more about some of the new features like the Wolf Companion and the Disarm mechanic, so let me talk you through everything. And one of the exciting new details we learned is regarding the structure of Yotei's story, as we finally have a better understanding of how open the main quest is going to be. My original understanding was that you'd be able to go after the Yotei 6, so the main bad guys in this new story, in any order. But that is in fact not the case, as Sucker Punch believes that a proper structure for a story is too important, which I fully agree with, by the way. So that means there is a set beginning, middle and end, but as creative director Jason Connell noted on the Friends Per Second podcast, the opening third of the game will offer players more freedom and gives you a choice on which of the available targets you want to pursue. So that is what I think they were showing in the state of play, but it seems like Sucker Punch is keeping the other two-thirds of the game under tight wraps. We might see a shift in Atsu's quest for vengeance after a major discovery, which then sets us on a more linear story path more similar to the original game. As always, your theories are more than welcome, so feel free to share them in the comments below. What I also found interesting is that while Hokkaido is a much bigger island than Tsushima, the game's story will be of similar length. Jason Connell told VGC that the length of the game will be similar to the original, but the runtime will be filled with more varied activities and will heavily depend on the player. According to How Long to Beat, that means the critical path will take players about 25 hours, which I think is a nice sweet spot, and 60 hours to do everything in Tsushima. I'm personally expecting even more for Yotei, as the Sony sequels we've seen this generation have significantly expanded their offering of side content and their map size. I also think it's interesting that Jason mentions more varied activities, as it seems to be a big focus for Sucker Punch in both main and side content. Next to there being new additions like Sumi E-painting and the coin-flicking minigame Zenny Hajiki, returning activities have been touched up for the sequel as well. During the FPS podcast, Connell mentioned that they've made different versions of things like the Bamboo Strike challenges to make sure that each one feels unique and to avoid the experience of doing the same thing over and over again. One part where I feel Tsushima already nailed this is in the side stories with characters like Lady Masako and Sensei Ishikawa. We have not seen these in action yet for the sequel, but Yotei should still include a ton of side missions like this, and some of these will feature the new weapon senseis. We now learned that they actually are the key to gain access to the new weapon types, even though the state of play seemed to imply that going after specific members of the Yotei 6 would reward you with the new weapon. So for example, we see Master Enomoto in the state of play, who has a little bio that tells us that he's a one-man army and an expert with the Kusarigama, yet there's a loneliness in him that I understand all too well. By doing missions for him, he will teach us to better use the Kusarigama, and we can also see he has new techniques to teach us. And as you might have guessed from that bio, we are also discovering parts of his story and will build a relationship with him, likely similar to the side characters of Tsushima, but now we are of course rewarded with new weapon types or brand new moves. You can definitely expect a video on that when the game releases, so subscribe if you haven't already, and if you are a subscriber, you can also enter our giveaway for the digital deluxe edition of the game. A link to that will be in the pinned comment. And now that we are on the topic of weapons, we also learned some very interesting new details regarding combat. I think a lot of people are underestimating how much the Disarm mechanic is going to change up combat, so let me explain. In an interview with Games Radar, creative director Nate Fox mentioned fighting on top of a bridge and having to use an enemy's disarmed weapon because your own was knocked over the ledge. While I had my doubts after the gameplay demo, as we only saw Atsu pick up a spear to throw it, this does make it sound like you'll actually be able to fully use any weapon you take off an enemy. This quote also raises a question, because how will we be able to retrieve our weapons that fall from the top of a mountain? No info on that yet, but the overall concept is very interesting, I think. Losing access to a weapon basically means you can't use a certain stance anymore, so you temporarily lose a specific tool that you can use to counter particular enemies. And while it is true that the new weapons you can swap between are replacing the katana stances from Tsushima, expanding is actually a better word for it. There is still a counter system in place where the Odachi is good against brutes and the dual katanas are good against spears, for example. But each weapon will also offer benefits and techniques, like using the weighted ball on a Kusarigama chain for an AoE attack, or using the length of a spear to push an enemy off a cliff. So while you are encouraged to switch up to counter enemy weapon types, you now also have to consider how many enemies you are facing and in what location when deciding what weapon you want to use. And we haven't even talked about ranged weapons yet, like like, we learned that the rifle is very powerful but will obviously alert enemies in a wide radius. So yeah, safe to say combat is looking even more dynamic than it did in Tsushima. And the stance system is not the only major mechanic from the first game that has been overhauled, as the guiding winds have also seen a small but very welcome change for the sequel. As noted by Jason Connell, now we actually have a little bit of a system to help guide around some of the major obstacles to make it a little bit more of an improved experience for such a vast world. In case you don't remember, the guiding winds in Tsushima pointed in a straight line towards your objective but did not consider obstacles like mountains or the sea. But in the sequel, they will guide you around them so you can more easily reach your objective. We also received confirmation that the songs you play on your shamisen while camping will help the winds guide you towards specific objectives in the open world, like the bamboo challenges, onsen, or even brand new cosmetics. We of course know that armor dice are back in this game, and it seems that we have to look for flowers again to unlock them. We see that in the footage here just before another cool new feature, as running alongside these flower trails actually boosts your speed. And we now also learned that following these should take you to interesting new locations, continuing the trend of having nature guide you in exploration. And while there are many clues you can collect through interrogating enemies or buying maps, Sucker Punch notes that this info is only there to help you find the interesting things. In case of a bounty, for example, it will tell you the last known location of a target, and from there you might have to figure out where they went. But that bounty target is already in the world, meaning you don't need to accept it as a quest and can just run into that enemy by accident if you're simply out exploring. During the FPS podcast, Nate Fox also mentioned that foraging for food is also part of the game, likely tied to the meals you can cook at your campfire. Not sure if there are different meals for different effects, but one interview mentioned an extra spirit orb as a benefit for eating a meal. In case you need a refresher on that, spirit is the new name for resolve from Tsushima, so the resource used to power your abilities and healing. Some more interesting things we learned are regarding the bounties, as while you can collect bounties on criminals, Atsu herself will also have a bounty on her head that gets higher as she makes more of a name for herself. This will start introducing new enemy archetypes and new types of traps and ambushes, which sounds kind of similar to how the Mongol army got stronger as you move through the different regions of Tsushima Island. The wolf is also an element that still has some mystery to it, but we did learn that it will be our primary animal companion. I know that awesome shot with the bear led to some speculation, but it doesn't look like we get to keep that one as a pet. And the wolf isn't exactly a pet either, as Sucker Punch clarified that it is definitely a wild creature. It will show up in some missions and it won't as well, because it won't just come because you call it in any random situation. That does still leave me with a ton of questions, but it does confirm they're not going for a Kratos and Atreus or Joel and Ellie approach with this companion. And while technical details will come at a later date, we do know Sucker Punch is working on extra enhancements for the PS5 Pro. They're also really vocal about how much they loved working with the DualSense controller, so I'm expecting some fun stuff with the haptics and the adaptive triggers here as well. But of course, the main way they are flexing the power of the PS5 is the new flashback mechanic, where you can instantly jump between past and present to learn more about Atsu's story. Nate Fox actually explained the mechanic to Game Informer, saying the following: "There are a few places in the world that have a lot of memories for Atsu. When you go to these locations, you can hit a button and instantly be transported to the past. You control young Atsu in these locations and you can go back and forth as much as you want." So that does confirm it is only accessible in certain locations, but it is still a very important feature. Atsu's story starts out driven by revenge because of her past, so in order to understand that feeling, it's very important we also see that past, and this is a really cool way of doing that. Let me know what you're most excited about in the comments, and remember to subscribe to not miss our next Ghost of Yotei video. Leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and watch our breakdown of the gameplay reveal by clicking on the screen. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.